Friendly heads up, that's all.
AK, shut your mouth.
Call to order. Before I've called it to order, before we go any further for the confirmation of the agenda and that, I'd like Dwayne just speak to the coronavirus that we're all experiencing right now and give you an update of right now what we're doing, what's going on, because it is consuming quite a bit of time. So I'm just going to turn it over to Dwayne.
So, from a municipality's perspective, as we're all aware, the coronavirus situation has been evolving very rapidly in the last few days. And efforts are being made, not just by North Huron, but other municipalities across the county as well, to what we refer to as flatten the curve or break the chain of transmission, in terms of, with respect to the virus itself. And as a result, and in terms of doing our part, we've implemented a number of provisions or changes. So just for the public's information, all of North Huron's recreational facilities have been closed and all outreach programs and activities have been discontinued, until April 3rd or further notice. North Huron's main daycare center has been closed and all programs and activities have been discontinued until April the 5th or further notice. The Wingham Town Hall Theatre has been closed until April the 5th or further notice. The landfill site will be open, but we will be implementing restricted form of payments in the form of debit, credit, or on accounts. Town Hall was open today, however, as a result of further discussions today, Town Hall will be closing effective tomorrow morning and again until April the 5th. Council, committee, and board meetings, that is an item for council to discuss later in our agenda in terms of how council wishes to proceed with those items. Council is obviously meeting this evening. Our next council meeting is April the 6th. So that's something for council's consideration, how you wish to proceed. And depending on the outcome of that discussion, we do have some motions for council's consideration regarding delegation of authority should council decide not to continue meeting as council, or on April the 6th or any time in between. So if we need to call a special council meeting, for example, we would not call a special council meeting unless council was to say that you wanted to call those council meetings. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's where we're at this point.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. That the council of the Township of North Huron accept the agenda for the March 16th, 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? Nita, and I have Kevin seconding. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interests. Seeing none, we will move on. Public comments. I don't see any public to have comments. Number 5 is the consent agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent agendas 5.1.1 and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 and 5.3.1 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Anita. I have Rick. Would somebody like to pull anything out? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, it's regarding 5.1.1. It's our minutes of our last meeting here. I don't know, it's important to me. I found that the minutes lack a little bit of detail in certain times, and the situation here is the sand shed, because there was no less than 3 councillors that were upset with the price of it. And yes, it is mentioned that there was conversation, but I think when there's multiple councillors with a major comment, one or so of them should be at least mentioned.
Thank you, Chris. And that's a comment, not a question, yes.
Comment.
Yes. Anyone else? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Six, public meetings. Can I get a motion to defer 6.1, Gil Gerard, Rochelle King, and Andrea Gardia? The Blythe Festival will not be here tonight for obvious reasons. I have Kevin first, seconder is Rick. Questions or comments? Seeing none, go ahead.
Yeah, it was were they just trying to give us a report on the economic situation? Were they asking for anything?
I'll let Carson speak to that. Carson had conversations with him.
Through your worship, so the purpose of the delegation was strictly for information purposes. Basically, they had an economic analysis conducted on the economic impact the Blythe Festival has for the region, and they wanted to present that to council for information. I know it's also going to county council, maybe not originally as planned anymore. It was scheduled for April 1st, so they wanted to address this council beforehand, but depending on where things are at and how things are up in the air, I'm not sure exactly when that will be going to county council.
Yeah, good.
It's number 7, reports. 7.1.1 is that this is the community improvement plan, commercial faucet grant intake, that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the clerk dated March 16th, 2020 regarding the community improvement plan 2020 fascia grant intake for the purpose, for information purposes. And further, the council of Township of North Huron receives 5 applications and approves the applications for 194 Josephine Street, Wingham, the Villa Restaurant, the Thai Villa Restaurant, in the amount of $6,633.81, and for 392 Queen Street, Blythe Decor Shop, in the amount of $1,996.90. And further, the council directs staff to notify the unsuccessful applications that they are encouraged to apply again during any further grant intake under the CIP program. And further, the staff be directed to investigate the labor completion component, that's right too, requirement of the CIP program, and provide a report back to the North Huron Economic Development Committee and Council for consideration. Can I have a mover? I have Chris, seconder. I have Paul. Before I take the vote, Carson's going to speak to this.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, as council is aware, in December of 2019, staff report was provided that updated both the Economic Development Committee and council on all the previously approved applications under the CIP program. And basically at this time, staff reached out to determine whether the applicants were going to go ahead with their facade improvement projects as originally approved. And after this was done, a total of $8,630.71 was left in the Downtown Main Street Revitalization Fund. And as a reminder to council that these are funds that are required to be used on downtown revitalization and need to be expended by no later than March 31st. And so this is the fund that was specifically directed to be used for this 2020 intake of the CIP. So staff advertised for this 2020 intake of the commercial facade grant, and after doing so, a total of 5 applications were received. 3 of those applications met the grant eligibility criteria, and if they were all approved up to the maximum of 50% of eligible cost, it would result in $23,453.80 in funds required to be allocated. However, there's, as stated previously, there's only $8,630.71. So at this time, we are not able to provide up to 50% to all of those projects. And knowing this, staff undertook a review of these projects and ranked them in according to how well they fit with the CIP eligibility criteria. As you will have seen in the report, those 5 applications are ranked there. And at the March 12th, 2020 meeting, the North Huron Economic Development Committee received an update on these applications, and basically they supported the motion, the staff's recommendation, which was that Tyville be awarded in the funds in the amount of $633.81, and then the Blythe Decor Shop be awarded the amount of $1,996.90. The one thing worth noting, in addition to the recommendations from staff, the North Huron Economic Development Committee expressed concern regarding the eligibility requirements related to who can complete the labor of these projects. Specifically, so the 2 that were not eligible The reasons they weren't is because the applicant would have, in essence, been completing their own labor. The Economic Development Committee passed a motion that they recommended that council direct staff to investigate this labor component because of the fact that there are limited builders and contractors in the municipality. And so they might not be able to get this project done if they're ineligible to undertake the labor as their own. So as of right now, staff have incorporated that recommendation from the Economic Development Committee in the recommendation of this report, and that's basically up for council.
Questions or comments? Trevor?
Yeah, I'm completely in favor of all of the discussion there, all of the comments that Carson had brought. The only thing I'm not in favor of is any discussion about internal labor being utilized under the CIP. So the intention is that, yeah, I understand the Economic Development Committee's this thought of there's a limited number of contractors in the municipality, but there's not a limited number of contractors in the world. So the fact is that, you know, if I'm somebody who's requesting taxpayer money, and I'm going to be doing the work, how is anybody supposed to understand how much that work is what you're charging for it, who's doing it, all that stuff. So I'm definitely not in favor of any internal labor being utilized for CIP. It doesn't, in essence, make sense. And it doesn't make sense from a transparent way of spending on taxpayer money. So, like I said, the report can come back from the CIP or from staff, but I will not be in favor of that report when it comes from staff.
Anyone else? Seeing no questions, all in favor? Carried. 7.1.2 is the heritage deed designation process for the Wingham Armours property. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the clerk dated March 16th, 2020 regarding the heritage deed designation process for the Wingham Armours property for information purposes. And further, that the clerk be directed to give notice of council's intention to repeal bylaw number 1804-1985- of the town of Wingham to de-designate the Wingham Armory property. Do I have a mover? I have Paul and I have Anita seconding. I'm gonna let Carson speak to this one too.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, as you will have seen attached to the report, the Ontario Heritage Trust has a record of 15 designated heritage properties currently in the Township of North Huron. All of these properties were designated within the Wingham Ward and between the years of 1982 to 1990. The Ontario Heritage Trust also had record of a 16th property, which has since had its designation repealed in 1996. So there was that spreadsheet that was attached to the report for council's information. So at its simplest, municipalities can designate or de-designate heritage properties under the Ontario Heritage Act. And also property owners can apply to have their property designated or de-designated by the municipality as well. As council will be aware, at the February 3rd regular meeting, council received a building condition assessment for the Wingham Armories property and passed a motion to have staff begin the de-designation process for this property. So a little bit about the Wingham Armories property. It was designated property within the municipality to be of heritage value or interest through bylaw 1804 of 1985, which was a town of Wingham bylaw. And specifically, the bylaw states that at the time, the council of the township of Wingham deemed the property to be of historic and architectural value and interest. And so the bylaw was enacted in May 6th of 1985, and Schedule A to that bylaw, which the bylaw and Schedule A are attached to this report, basically designated the property at that time. So as you'll have seen in the report, basically the approach we took was to outline the process for council, whether it's regardless of whether it's a designation or de-designation, just so council has that information. First, it's important to be aware that When a municipality intends to designate or de-designate a property under the Ontario Heritage Act, it requires that municipalities consult with their local municipal heritage council or municipal heritage committee where one has been appointed, and we do not have a municipal heritage committee, so therefore no consultation is required. So the next step when a municipality intends to designate or de-designate the property is basically they go through the process to put out a notice of intention, and so this notice of intention is either a notice of intention to designate the property or either a notice of intention to repeal the designation of the property. In this case, for the Wingham Armories building, it would be a notice of intention to repeal the designation. Once that designation is put out, basically that triggers 30-day period where anyone wishing to object to the de-designation or designation has 30 days to make that notice of objection known. If any objections are received within that 30-day period, basically it automatically goes off to the Ontario Conservation Review Board, and they will conduct a hearing, hear all the relevant facts to the case, and then within 30 days of that hearing, provide a report back to council. If there are no objections served on the municipality within that 30-day period, then basically council can pass a bylaw to repeal the designation or to designate the property depending on the situation, or they could, if they wanted to no longer go down that path, they could withdraw the notice of intention. Once it's heard by the Conservation Review Board, as I mentioned, the report comes back and council gives that report consideration, but then ultimately after reviewing the report, council can either have those same two options to pass a bylaw to designate or repeal the designation or withdraw their notice of intention, and then after that the decision made by council is final. So at this time the direction we require for the Wingham Armories property is if council wants to continue with the process of de-designation, the clerk needs to be directed to carry out prepare and provide the public the notice of intention to repeal the heritage designation for the Wingham Armories property. And this would basically initiate the process of notice of objections. The one thing I want to point out here is council has also passed a motion to receive potential offers for a proposed sale of the property. And given the fact that council is currently receiving offers until May 1st of 2020, if there was no appeal or if there was no notice of objection, it would still council still wouldn't want to pass the bylaw to repeal that designation until after they've had a chance to review those potential offers, in case there's the fact where someone has submitted an offer contingent on the fact that it's currently a heritage property.
Thank you, Carson. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Kevin.
Just a clarification through your review. On the list of properties that are designated heritage, all the designations are all pre-amalgamation and all reside in the town of Wingham. Are there properties in East Walnashon and Blythe that are heritage designated? Not on the North Huron list?
Through your worship, there's not.
None? Okay, that's what I was just wondering why there was all the addresses were just here. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Then drop down to 7.2.1. This is the development charges summary. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the 2019 development charges statement dated March 16th, 2020, as presented by the Director of Finance. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Rick. Donna, could you speak to this, please?
Yes, Ruth Bailey. Thank you. So each year the treasurer is required to present to council a summary of the development charges received for that particular year. And so in 2019, we had 17 development charges collected as part of the building permit process, and the total of those collected was $73,419. So since 2011, when development charges were implemented, a total of 139,160 has been collected. So a very significant portion, almost 50%, less than 50%, was collected in 1 year. So it's terrific that the ongoing development that we enjoyed last year certainly met why they implemented development charges in the first place. So the original cost of implementing development charges, there had to be a study done by BM Ross, and that cost us $33,000. And a portion of each development charge collected, each charge is divided into a number of components, but you're allowed to put the administration component back to offset the original cost. So out of that $33,000, we still have $4,067 remaining on those original administrative charges, but certainly at the rate we're going, in 2020, we certainly will hopefully be able to pay that off. Also, just as a note, and we've talked about this a bit before, but originally we had two other sewer projects in the Wingham ward. One was the force main replacement and the Josephine Street sewer replacement. And so we did collect development charges for a short time on those two projects, and that amounted to $4,649. And then since, I can't remember which year, we decided then that those projects were completed, paid for, and so then any of the sewer amounts collected now go strictly to the northwest trunk sewer, which is part of development that we hope to be undertaking over the next few years. So at this time then, at the end of 2019, we have a total of $101,131.12 available to be used to offset future costs relating to development. So the schedule was attached there showing those individual categories. And as I said, each development charge collected has to be separated out into those categories and recorded and kept separately.
Thank you, Donna. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, just a clarification. On the new development plans, there are park space, open spaces and parks. Are they the responsibility of the municipality once they're erected, or are they going to be the responsibility of the developer? As far as, like, some monies go to parks and lands and stuff, is that something that we should be putting away money for the new parks?
I'm gonna let Donna speak to that. as part of
Actually, I
this.
think through, my understanding of that is that would be covered through the development agreement, but I would ask Dwayne, he's got more.
So in terms of when you're doing a development, in terms of what we call your green space, you can ask for, and I think it's 5% of the land base to develop a park for a particular development. But in terms of you acquiring that land, you're assuming responsibility for it and the development of it. Your other option is to collect what we call cash in lieu. So it's called cash in lieu of parkland. So you collect a financial, and there's a formula that's used, and you collect money that you're then to budget, you put it into your budget, but then you're to apply it towards other parks that essentially would service that development. So if you determine that you don't need a park in every development, you want to have one big park, then you take the money from the developments and funnel it into a park. But we would be responsible for the park.
So I'm gonna touch on this one just for a second, because this is kind of a colorful one for me. Many years ago, there was a fellow like me sitting on council, and we all decided, actually it was our staff decided we should have development fees. And at the time, Donna will remember, it was gonna cost us $30,000, and going on what we were developing at the time, we thought we'd maybe be 200 years just getting the $30,000 out of it. But we stuck with it. We thought it was a good idea, we stuck with it, it's been here ever since. We seen the change this year, didn't we? Those development fees that we kinda joked about and had some pretty heavy discussions about too, if I recall, because of the cost of doing it wasn't justified by the amount we were using it at the time and the day we were using it. There's another example of something 10 years later, there you go, it worked. So keep that in mind as we think of things that may be way out in the atmosphere and we think won't work. It just may come around one day. Anyway, anyone else like to speak to it? See, go ahead.
Reeve,
Chris.
just the AMO, sorry, BMO, yeah, they play sports and a bank. AMOs, they're talking about the provincial planned, or it's something that's going through a draft right now. And it's talking huge, like up to 15% of the land value. Like, that's drastic.
For park, you mean?
Well, it's for several things, libraries, long-term care,
Oh, yeah.
park,
Yeah,
things like that. But that would include us to a point. And I know it's in draft form, but like, it's a lot. It's just a lot. Like, as soon as I read that, I went, you know, that's, if it's provincial wide, it could drive people or businesses out of the province, because that's a lot,
Yeah.
15%. I'm hoping that they revise it down to something that's more workable.
And again, at AMO on that, we should be voicing our opinion on these type of things.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Chris. Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.2, the statement of remuneration and expenses, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the 2019 Council Statement of Remunerations and Expenses dated March 16th, 2020, prepared by the Director of Finance. Do I have a mover? I have Anita, I have Rick seconding. Questions or comments? I don't see any, so I will call the motion. All in favor? Carries. There's no report for 7.3. Or 7.4.1 will be the proposed North Huron street naming policy. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the Director of Public Works dated March 16th, 2020 regarding the draft street naming policy for information. And further, the council directs the clerk to finalize and bring forward the North Huron street naming policy and bylaw for council consideration at the April 6, 2020 regular council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Paul and I have Anita seconding. Sean, could you speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. So as council's probably aware, there's currently no street naming policy that's in place for the township. So what we've seen recently is what seems to be the current practice is that the developer picks names, preferred names for the streets that he or she is developing, and then pushes it right into the Huron County Planning Department for vetting. In all fairness, this method is very quick and efficient, but quite frankly, it does very little to play into North Huron's heritage, its unique identity, or anything to do with fostering a sense of community pride. For this reason, staff has gone ahead and drafted the policy that you see before you tonight for consideration. The policy in front of you actually depends heavily on what we're referring to as a master street naming list. This list would be developed and vetted by Public Works, and once it's established, it's updated through the clerk's office. The policy in front of you talks about how names get onto that and what you have to do to qualify to have a name on there. But the big thing is this is a mechanism that also allows for public input, but ensures that North Huron heritage, history, culture, and some of our unique characteristics are all considered before they get onto that master naming list. It's important to note that council, under this new policy, has the authority to assign the street names. It doesn't fall on the developer or anybody else. However, I should point out that the names must meet strict emergency services criteria in order to be presented for consideration and approval by council. So, council has the authority, but the names have to be vetted through emergency services first, otherwise they don't fly. We believe that this policy actually relates to action item 1.1 under the economy goal, in that it improves the efficiency and timeline of the development approval system. Now, and it's up to council. Everybody's got the policy in front of them. If you'd like, Reeve, I can go through a few of the highlights, or it's entirely up to you.
Council's wishes, would you like them to go through it? I see some head shaking,
Okay,
yes, please.
happy to. So, first piece here is the development of the master reserve street name list. So, the proponent of a development which incorporates new public or private streets, or any interested body or any township citizen can at any time submit a street name for consideration to an addition to the master reserve street name list. That request would go to the Public Works Department for initial consideration, and at that point, Public Works would look to evaluate the suitability and appropriateness based on conformity with some of the things we'll touch on in a second. So the written request would be submitted to the Director of Public Works, and especially if it's coming from the public, the expectation is that written request would outline the criteria by which it qualifies, not just here's a name for the list. We would like this name on the list because it meets the following criteria. And those criteria are, the name should have historic significance. The name that's being presented should be associated with something to do with the township's heritage. It should be culturally or regionally significant. It could recognize wildlife, flora, fauna, natural features, or something that's unique to the township. Or, and this is the last one that we added, was the name must pay homage to a resident of North Huron that lost their life while in the service with the Canadian Armed Forces. You know, so that would be an opportunity to recognize veterans that lost their lives. In the process of looking at street names, no name would be considered for the master reserve list if it was derogatory, discriminatory, slang, crude, overly complex, or a name that was similar in nature to something that to a street we already have, whether that was in sound or in spelling. And that ties back into that whole emergency services thing. We don't want confusion, right? The proposed names would then be vetted against that, against all other street names in the township to make sure that there was obviously no duplicates or anything like that. And then if they make it through that point, they go on to the list. The clerk then is responsible for maintaining that list. So as far as the process goes, that gives us the list. As far as the process goes, the naming of any new public or private street is the responsibility of council. However, all street names assigned in the township of North Huron must be approved by the county of Huron in the manner set out. The only street names that could be considered by council would be ones that are drawn from the master street naming list. So there wouldn't be any walk-ons or one-offs in the last at the last minute. Now, we did say that developers are encouraged to review the master reserve street name list, and they can make suggestions, but again, to stress, council has the final authority. And where this ties in is, and that street name would be assigned at the time of approval of the draft plan of subdivision and utilized from that point forward. The idea being that then early on in the game, the streets are clearly identified, so when staff or council are dealing with it, they know exactly which street they're dealing with. Now, you would receive a report when there was a request for a street name to be designated. And that report would contain a couple of things that would help you make the decision. Provides details surrounding the streets in question, indicates the general size and scope of the development. And this one I thought was important. It provides the name of the streets adjacent to that street to be named, as well as outlining the suffix for the street. And one of the reasons you would do that is, in the report, is if you had, let's just use a simple example, a new subdivision, and it was ash and oak and maple and pine, you could consider that and not end up with some random name that just didn't fit the rest of the subdivision. So that way, as council, as you're making the decision, you really have a good sense of was there a theme being applied to this particular area of town. So that would all be included in that report that would come forward. The permit, the policy outlines a bunch of the suffixes and what type of road they would apply to. I won't go into that list. But then once all that heavy lifting's been done and council's come up with their preferred name, what they have to do is select a total of 5 street names for every street they want to list in order of priority. And the reason they do that, that's required, is then that list of 5 names to name one street goes to county. Emergency services then looks at county-wide, vets the name, makes sure there's no duplication, make sure that there's no confusion that's going to be created. And as we saw with the Rutledge subdivision, they crossed a couple off, that they were overly complex or duplicate. So you've put 5 forward, and in the interest of time and the quick flow of through the process, they may take 2 or 3 of them off the name, so then you would pick the next highest that's on your list of 5 names. Okay, so that really does streamline everything, and then at that point, that recommended list is brought forward, council approves it, and then the only other thing that this, I think that's important in the policy is, once named, the assigned street names are to be considered. So it's a big decision, and not one that we would expect you would go back on and say, you know what, in hindsight, let's call it something else. So it lends some permanency to the process.
Kind of like North Street or Beeline, don't get me started. Every town has one. Kevin, go ahead.
Through you, I'm just wondering if we could make a slight addition to 5.8.5, the naming of the streets. 5.85 is streets naming, paying homage to residents who lost their lives while serving with the Canadian Armed Forces. We're currently not at war with anyone, and we have had people that have given their life in servitude to this municipality in other actions, in other factions, be it line of duty death, OPP. They have some neighboring service members in the fire services have also died servicing the greater good of the people around. I'm just wondering whether that could be just amended to not only service by the Canadian Armed Forces, but somehow include the servitude of either line of duty or great sacrifice to other members of the community.
Kevin, if you don't mind me asking, would first responders be efficient for what you're looking for an addition?
Yes, I'm just, not to bring up bad memories, but VUFAM, we've got Dave Mounsey that have died in the line of duty for the OPP. I would just, it might be wise to be able to include them at some point if someone wanted to name something in that, or heaven forbid other future line of duty deaths occur. I just don't see any other avenue to be able to name other than someone who's in the Canadian Armed Forces.
We're gonna let Carson speak to that.
Through your worship, Sean and I are nodding heads here. We get the gist of definitely what you're trying to accomplish, and we can definitely wordsmith that and include that as criteria as well to expand first responders and anyone who lost their life in the line of duty.
Wouldn't hope it could be a first responder. Yeah, so we should make an amendment to the motion, or you want it to come back? Go ahead, Trevor.
This is just a draft, so it'll come back for final,
Okay.
final review for vote for
Okay.
council to consideration.
Through your worship, and when that bylaw comes forward, it'll just have that change.
Paul?
Yes, through you, Reeve. That's really good. I appreciate your point there. But also, I know the BIA's been mentioning about branding Wingham as a music town and whatnot too. So maybe things like that. Maybe get some input. As you say, they'll be doing that anyways, asking the public. But get some input with that too. And it gives all avenues there. I really like that.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Just for both. I think that would fall into historical significance, names associated with the township's heritage. I mean, that kind of thing would be fitted into those criteria as well, having to change the wording on
Through your worship, yeah. So that's exactly what Sean and I had envisioned when drafting this policy. Stuff like that would definitely be captured with the township's heritage piece.
Any other comments? I believe the staff has heard the discussion and will make the changes for us and bring it back another day, so I'm gonna call the motion. All in favor? Carried. So we're going down to 7.8.1, the OSUM nomination. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the CAO dated March 16th, 2020 regarding nomination of the CAO as an administrative member of the OSUM Executive Committee for information purposes. And further, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby supports the nomination of the CEO for the Township of North Huron, Dwayne Evans, as the administrative member to the OSUM Executive Committee for a 2-year period effective April 29th, 2020. And if elected or acclaimed, commits to sending a minimum of 2 council representatives to attend the OSUM conference annually. And further, that the elected or acclaimed associates express expenses to attend OSUM Executive Committee meetings approximately 3 times per year, and the OSUM annual conference be reimbursed to the CAO as included in the 2020 budget. Do I have a mover for that? I have Kevin and I have Rick seconding. Dwayne, could you speak to that?
Sure, Reeve. So the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities is a organization that's an integral part of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And essentially, it's a small urban municipal voice of the province. So it's an avenue or a venue to get the small urban voice heard at the AMO table and at the provincial table. The purpose of OSUM is to provide a forum for both elected and appointed municipal officials of small urban municipalities to exchange and receive information, to consider matters of common interest, and to take united action on issues of mutual interest to improve local government service in Ontario. OSUM is led by a chair and an executive committee. The executive committee consists of no more than 15 members, and 3 of those members are municipal employees. Members of the committee are either an elected representative or an employee of a member municipality in good standing. And members on the executive committee are elected at the annual OSUM conference for a 2-year period, and they hold office for 2 years or until their successors are appointed. Since 2015, I've been one of the administrative members on that executive committee. The nominations form for that committee have been issued and they're due back by April 15th. And in terms of putting your name forward for nomination, it does require the support of your council. And so tonight I'm seeking council support to submit a 2020 nomination form. And if that support is granted, as the Reeve has indicated in the recommendation, it does require that a minimum of 2 council representatives attend the OSUM conference annually. In terms of benefits, in terms of sitting on the executive committee, there's many, but just to highlight a few, there's an opportunity there to network with other municipal staff. There's also the sharing and receiving information with municipalities from across the province. So again, it's not just, it takes you beyond just your regional issues that you're dealing with, opportunity to hear what's happening across the province. There's also an opportunity through that committee to meet and interact with provincial ministers and staff. I've been at meetings with the OSUM Executive Committee with Minister Clark, for example. He's come in and had some discussions with the committee and has shared with us what the province is thinking and where the province is going with things, and often is seeking input and feedback from that group. As well, as part of the OSUM Executive Committee, there's the opportunity to develop relationships with AMO's Executive Director, which is the provincial voice. So you get to interact and meet with the Executive Director and the staff, as well as gaining insight on the issues that are being discussed between AMO and the province. And finally, you get to develop action plans on issues of mutual interest to smaller municipalities. And just a bit of an aside, so through my involvement with OSUM. I've been very fortunate to personally know the past president of AMO and the current president of AMO, which is beneficial just in terms of I can email Jamie McGarvey, Orlin Dolan, who are the current and past presidents, and put things forward for their consideration, which is, I think, an added benefit. As Reeve has indicated, in terms of the cost to send 2 council representatives and myself to the annual OSUM conference, it's approximately $2,400, so for 3 people. The funds are currently in the 2020 budget, so there is no impact on the budget. In addition to that, there would be costs for me to attend approximately 3 OSUM executive committee meetings. They're held at various venues in the province, sometimes in Toronto, sometimes, Northern Ontario, Eastern Ontario. But generally speaking, those are around $500, and it's simply primarily your travel and accommodation. And again, those costs have already been accounted for in the 2020 budget. So in terms of supporting the nomination going forward, there is no additional impact on the budget for this year.
Thank you, Dwayne. Questions or comments, concerns for Dwayne? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Congratulations, Dwayne. 7.8.2, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the CAO dated March 16th, 2020 regarding the Consolidation 2020 salary grid. And further, that the council approves the removal of the principal of the Emergency Service Training Center from the salary grid effective April 6, 2020. And further, that the council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw adopting the 2020 salary grid for the April 6, 2020 regular meeting of council approval. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Rick seconding. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, just wanted some clarification on just some of the duties have changed since this was put up there. On the salary grid, top salary grid, CIO, and this is deputy clerk. But not clerk. Just wondering, is that a Ms. Printer, since we now have a CEO and a clerk rather than the deputy clerk, should that just be changed in the wording of it?
Okay, I'll hand that over to
Through
Carson.
you, Your Worship. So that's the discussion we've had before. So you have one clerk, so that would be myself, which is reflected in there as the clerk / health and safety coordinator. And then at the time of my hiring, Dwayne was also appointed as the deputy clerk in addition to his CAO role. So that's the distinguishing between basically my position and his position.
It just looked like to me that the deputy clerk was getting more salary than the clerk, so that's, I just wonder whether that's, I understand now. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Okay, guys, wasn't ready. 7.8.3, Service Delivery Review. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the CEO dated March 16th, 2020 regarding the request for proposal results for the Service Delivery Review and information purposes. And further, that the council awards the contract for the Service Delivery Review in the amount of $70,000 plus applicable taxes to KPMG. And further, that council authorizes staff to sign an agreement with KPMG for the Service Delivery Review. And further, that council deems the adoption of bylaw 29-2020 being a bylaw to enter into a transfer payment agreement with Her Majesty the Queen in the right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to be a time-sensitive matter and grant the exception to the section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow bylaw 29-2020 to be passed at the March 6th, 16th, 2020 council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and I have Chris seconding. Questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead, Trev.
I guess not a concern, more of a comment. I know we've had, I know KPMG had done some service delivery work, or at least service work as it relates to the fire service, back when the ESTC was going through its turbulent times. And my hope is through the scope of the service delivery review and that we get more out of the report than what we had gotten out of the report when they had done it for the Emergency Services Training Center. So I don't know whether it was KPMG's issue or the scope of the work or what it was, but it seemed to not, it just seemed that we didn't get what we needed in order to go to economic development, in order to get funding, and there was that's a whole other issue in itself. So I just want to make sure that the scope of this work under the guidelines of the municipality and the requirement that it's clear enough that when KPMG presents this report, we can do something with it, as opposed to just sitting on the desk and sitting on and not doing anything with it. I know we're gonna have some struggles with implementing anything, changes or reductions or anything like that, because that's not what the vote is about. But I just know we have had some exposure with KPMG, and I don't know what the deal was. I just want to make sure it's clear that the scope is clear, so that when we get the report, we can utilize the report to its full effect.
So I'm sure senior staff heard that, because I agree with Deputy Reed Site that we want to be, it has to be a usable document. Any other questions, concerns, or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. Everybody in favor? Carries. Correspondence, notice of retirement. Well, Sean, we're not gonna accept it, so now what are you gonna do? Sean McGee, Director of Public Works and Facilities, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby accept and with regrets the retirement of Sean McGee, Director of Public Works and Facilities, effective August 31st, 2020, and further that the CEO be directed to prepare a report to address retirement vacancy. Do I have a mover? I have Anita, seconder. I have Paul. All in favor? Carries. Oh, before we go, anybody want to say anything to Sean before we move on? Like, why are you leaving us? I mean, congratulations.
I have one better than that.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I had a nightmare when I heard about it. No, Sean, you are doing a wonderful job, and all of us have mentioned it often that we're so happy with, like, all of our staff and you there for sure. And it's going to be hard to replace you, but you have set a bar, which means it's only your clone or nothing.
Anybody else like to speak?
I just want to thank him through you, Dave. I just like, thank you. I can go and ask you questions, and he always has time for you. Very much appreciate that.
Okay, let's move on to correspondence. Oh, sorry, yeah, so 8.2, let's move on to letter from Maitland District School Board to the Minister of Education, Stephanie Lease. I wonder if somebody would like to put a motion forward for that one, or have a conversation about that one, whether we want to support or not support.
Is it just receiving? Because we are not in a position that we can support
If you
things
don't
like
want to,
this.
okay.
Like, our nature is we can't, because
Okay.
we would be, they're against our upper tier.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be very careful there. Do we need comment from you?
Through you,
As
I'm
proper
not
protocol?
entirely sure what you mean. So my understanding of this letter is basically that AMDSB is looking for support in the activities they're doing to advocate for basically putting students back into schools and to end the strike. Council could council could pass a motion to support the letter, or council could receive it for information.
So I didn't hear of anybody that wanted to support it, so it'll be received for personal information. Okay?
Yeah, so we should have we should put a motion, so.
So I'll move that we receive for information.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Second it. Any more questions or comments or concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 8.3. We have AMO's free asset management training and hands-on dedication support to the staff of council. Dedicated support to the staff and council. That the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to execute the letter of support and commitment for AMO's free assessment management training and hands-on dedicated support for staff and council program. Do I have a mover?
This might be where you want Donna to explain.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna get Donna, yeah. You go ahead and talk to it first, then Donna.
Thank you, Reeve Bailey. So as you know, asset management is at the forefront of our priorities these days. And this is a free training program that has come out for both staff and council. So it's a program that runs from April 2020 to June of 2021. And for the staff involved, you have to commit a minimum of at least 3 staff from different departments. And they have to participate into 2 full-day workshops and 5 remote coaching sessions. And as well, then your council has to commit to taking the online asset management course. So that course, though, is a 1 to 1.5 hour course. And what I would do is set that up so that all of you could take it at the same time, either before or after another meeting or something like that. So we would set that up so that you could do it together, if you so choose. You still could if you wanted to individually take it online yourself, but just wanted to let you know that you're not committing to 10 weeks of something or something like that. It's 1 to 1.5 hours. And so then there's a number of milestones that you have to report on, and a number of evaluations that you have to go through in order to determine your readiness scale. So I do think this is a good opportunity for us to participate. And again, there is no cost, except for I'm assuming there would be some mileage in order to get to wherever the meetings are. But I just wanted to let you know also that what happens is the municipalities are grouped with 8 to 10 other municipalities participating in the same geographic area. So you would be in a group of probably, here in Perth, Wellington. You wouldn't be paired with a group way off somewhere. So you'd be working with some neighboring municipalities on that. At this point, it's too early to say who all has been accepted or not. So again, I think it's a very good opportunity. I've participated in several of the AMO initiatives as we've journeyed through our asset management, and any help that we can get, especially at no cost, is certainly betters our long-term plan. So I would appreciate it if council would give consideration to supporting this action.
Thank you, Donna. Paul, did I see you had your hand up for?
No, I'm for it.
Yeah. So I was looking for a mover though.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought you did, yeah.
That up to-
Kevin's gonna second it. Questions or comments from the staff, from the council? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Wingmore Police Services Board, OPP Detachment Commander Report. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby accepts the OPP Detachment Commander Report, Wingham Ward, for the month of February for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Nita. I have Chris seconding. Trevor, do you want to speak to this one?
I can take any questions. There's not much I would suggest. When I read the report over the weekend, there is not a lot of things that are eye-catching in my mind. I think over the next, as you go into March and April and May and that type of stuff, now we're going to be starting to see comparisons into the previous year,
As you can see that the call volume, was 85 in the month of February. It was only 33 in 19. Well, they only started on February 21st in 19. So I think ultimately what you're gonna see is you're gonna see more comparative data as it relates to call volume and calls for service and that type of stuff. So I would say that the council will have more, and the police services board will have more, I would say, comparative information that they can go on as it relates to the service that we're getting from the OPP.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Trevor? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Council reports. Is there anybody that sits on a, oh, okay. Reza, you know something? I know it's gonna sound kinda silly, but I was so busy in the last 2 weeks, I forgot to write a report down. At county level, we passed what we call a concierge program, which means that the municipalities are gonna work hand in hand with the county staff at the county level, and the county structured themselves in a way so that we can actually go to a singular entity and start with developments. We went through a lot of struggles and hassles with the developments we're working on now. And it's gonna be nice to be able to, they've actually started to line things up so we can ask certain people questions and get answers instead of going down to 32 different people and back 6 months later. I see it as a good thing the way it was rewritten. The first time it was written, it was turned down by the county. It did not present well, shall we say, and let it go at that. The idea of having the county building in Blythe is going to come front and center within the next, I believe it's 3 meetings of county. Again, with what's going on, I'm not sure, we might be canceling some meetings. There are 3 places it could be. It could be in Blythe, it can be in Central Huron, or it can stay in Goderich. In the very beginning, it was going to stay in Goderich, they were gonna build in Goderich. But the new council decided to have a look around, and those are the 3 that were picked. If anybody knows any reeves or mayors from other municipalities, please speak to them. I could use their vote. Okay? All I'm asking is that the county put the county building in the as close as they can to the center of Huron County. It'll be a once in 3 lifetimes you will get this chance, instead of being on the west coast, because I believe the county should be in the center of it, and that's what it's all about. And the fact that Blythe has such a phenomenal reputation, I'm sure more people would like to come and visit Huron County if it was there. Acute labor shortage, as you know what we did at the last meeting, we made it a committee of council, or an ad hoc committee of council. We have not had a meeting with it yet. There's been several other things going on, and we're searching for information and waiting for the information to come forward. But very clearly, in about 60 days or less, when those new buildings on the end of town open up, we do not have enough staff to keep everything open anymore. So therefore, we're glad that the Maitland Estates have come along, and we can't do enough to help the Maitland Estates. Those I'd say would be about the 3 highlights of this time. So let's go down to 9.2, and let's go to council member reports. Would any council like to speak to committees or anything, or there's anything going on? Go ahead, Anita.
Chris and I went to the Huron County Federation of Agriculture meeting with the politicians. It was a really good meeting. Lots of complaints, of course, about everybody, and I think Lisa Thompson and Matt Love had a good ear, and some good conversations going on. For the Economic Development Committee, we had Doug Surson, the Maitland Estates presentation. Jamie Shipley from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Company was there with a presentation about financing possibilities for individuals, companies, etc. And we talked about the community improvement plan. The only thing that I want to say for the Maitland Estates, I hope companies like Biax and Brightspan and Gailey will get involved in some investment in the Maitland Estates, because that gives them a first choice in lots and in buildings, what they want to do for their workers.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope they put some money into investing in housing for their workers.
Mhm.
if it's possible.
If it's possible,
If it's
yes.
possible. And they were all talking about the grey wave that is coming from like Toronto, Waterloo, Listowel over here, and I hope they the building will be also for retirees from North Huron, that they build houses for them, so houses that are people living in right now will be opening up for workers.
And available for
Yeah.
families, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, at the Federation meeting, felt that everybody had very constructive comments, and I was quite impressed with Lisa and Ben's, how their answers were. They were smart answers, and they had answers for everything. This may be something good governments do, but no, they honestly did, and I felt sort of reassured by what I heard.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. There's no notice of motion this week.
Oh,
You missed the comment.
there's comments.
Oh, sorry. Just kind of getting ahead of myself here tonight, am I not? That's what, third time? Comments by members. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Rave. Yeah, so we did, I just want to make sure I hear it right, I heard it right, that regarding the dump being, it's going to remain open now because of our email that was being closed at that time. I had a phone call, that's good to hear, had a phone call from a very close neighbor of the landfill, and they were very concerned about if it was going to be closed, you know, it's going to be garbage all over, people turning in his driveway and leaving nails. You know how people get ticked off. This is one of those times people do get ticked off. So I've been trying to get a hold of them just to talk it out, but now I have a good thing to say to them. So it is business as usual, other than you said payment is going to be maybe done differently.
Go ahead, Sean.
If I may, Your Worship, that's the only thing I wanted to stress, just for the benefit of anybody that's watching. The hours will remain the same as they have for the time being. That being said, we are not accepting cash, so it's debit, or it's people with pre-existing accounts outside of, so that's the only change, is that we're not handling cash. It's just a method of managing this whole COVID-19 piece, right?
Will the keypad be cleaned
Keypads.
down?
It's going to be disinfected after every use. So
Good.
basically, you tap or you punch, he wipes it down. It protects people, it also protects our employee.
Good.
Okay. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, through your Reeve. On just that same cleanliness, wiping things down, I have a comment and a question to, I guess, the staff, whether it be health and safety or management. During the last pandemic, the SARS went through Toronto, there was I guess a movement, not a declaration, but a movement through the emergency services, and I noticed, and I remember it being assisted by a request for the emergency services to go to what they call universal precautions. It just means a little higher level, means eye protection when our first responders are going into calls of difficulty breathing, which is one of the key factors for initiating a fire response to a medical. And it just allows them, I don't know whether they, if that precaution is presented to them, that they have the ability to obtain the proper protection. It's not often that face shields are repeatedly restocked in the fire services or in the EMS. They do have P95 masks that they used the last time. I just don't know if those, I would just be, just want to make sure that they are given the universal precautions okay to go to that level. I noticed our fire services isn't joining us here tonight, or I would have just asked him, but it was something that was used during the last one, and I just would like to know that they're being allowed to do that again.
We were in a conference call today. Dwayne, did you want to pick up on that?
I'm wondering if we want to touch it in this other business section and talk about the subject as a whole.
We are actually gonna talk about what's going on, and let's bring that, as Carson suggested here, let's bring that as part of that conversation later. We did have a conversation with them today, and they aren't totally prepared, but we're gonna have a bigger conversation shortly, so let's address that at that time. How's that?
That's fine.
Thank you, Carson. Any more comments? Seeing none. Notice of motion, we have none. Eleven point one has been struck, we don't have to, oh, sorry, it's a bylaw number 28/2020, a bylaw to authorize the Reeve clerk to sign on behalf of council a transfer payment agreement between the corporation of the Township of North Huron and Her Majesty Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor and I have Kevin. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries. 12, announcements. Provided the conversation we're gonna have shortly and what goes on in the world around us. So, they're there for you to look at. It's the next, North Huron Police Services Boards on Tuesday, March 17th. The quarter revision will be on March 19th. The next House and Dam meeting will be on March 25th. The next regular council meeting will be on April 6th. The next, Huron Museum Committee will be on April 16th, again, depending on, what happens with, things going on. 13, other business. I think this is where we're going to talk about what's going on in the world. I'm gonna hand it over to Dwayne to bring us all up to speed, I believe, on what we've been doing so far and what's going on. If I've got this right, it's all yours, Dwayne.
Yeah, so I guess just in terms of, so as council's aware, since about last Friday afternoon, as previously reported, there's been an elevated, the situation regarding the virus is changing very rapidly, and that's requiring us to respond very quickly and very rapidly. The CAOs of the lower tier municipalities, we've had 3 teleconference calls. We had one Friday afternoon, one Friday morning, one Friday afternoon, and we had one again today. So just in terms of conversing and assessing the risks, and we're trying to also ensure that we're having consistency across the municipalities. In addition to that, from a staff's perspective, we're continuing to monitor and we're continuing to put into place preventative measures for staff, ensuring their safety. And part of that safety is closing facilities. In terms of going to Councillor Faulkner's comments, we did have an emergency operations committee meeting today. And the emergency operations basically was for the purposes of seeing, and at that, it was a teleconference call, and fire was on that call, housing was on that call, town staff were on that call. David Clark, who's the county's emergency management coordinator, was on the call as well. And so, in terms of, I gave an update in terms of what we've done thus far. And then we went around the group that was there to get their comments and ask them to update us in terms of what was happening in their various areas of responsibility. So paramedics, for example, the ambulance service was on the call as well. Marty was on the call, and he indicated that they were well intact, that everything was fine. He did indicate that they do have 2 individuals who are currently in self-isolation, 2 part-time individuals, as I recall. 2 part-time, who are currently in self-isolation for a 14-day time period. They traveled external to the country, but from a response perspective, he saw no impact on our ability to provide that service. In terms of face masks and that wasn't specifically discussed, but certainly in terms of from a municipality's perspective, as a, we're safeguarding our employees. So I mean, I'm sure Marty, if it's identified that they need that equipment, I'm sure Marty will ensure that they have whatever they need to make sure that they can continue to provide the service in a safe manner. I guess just in terms of, not to jump ahead, but one of the conversations, or we're seeking direction in terms of, we're continuing to monitor the situation, and that will continue. There's information, the information flow has been amazing. My email has been filling it very, very quickly. A lot of information to read, a lot of advice from health professionals, etc. But one of the conversations that I feel that we need to have as council is our council committee and our board meetings. Essentially, the indication we're getting is that we don't want to do things that essentially for the purposes of bringing people together. Essentially, that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to do the social distancing. A number of municipalities, including Bruce County and Huron County, have canceled their council, committee, and any board meetings. Several lower tier municipalities have followed suit. In terms of Goderich has canceled. ACW has canceled. I believe Central has canceled. Who am I missed? South Huron, I believe, but I can't say 100%. The CAO wasn't on the second call today. But there's a number of municipalities who are proceeding with no council meetings, and no committee meetings, and no board meetings during that time period. So, looking for feedback and comments in terms of how council would like to proceed here. Huron East did indicate on the call today that they do have a council meeting tomorrow night, but that's anticipated to be their last meeting until April the 5th. And then during the next 2 to 3 week time period, they will be assessing things as well.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the floor now. Thank you, Dwayne. I think where we're trying to go with this is we are having a meeting and we're sitting side by side, and we are we're supposed to represent our constituents and lead the way, so to speak. We don't want all of us down and being sick at one time. That would not do any good at all. So let's talk about the committee meetings to start with. Yes, yeah.
So through your worship, so as council will be aware, the 2 meetings that we currently have scheduled beyond this council meeting are, one, the police board tomorrow, and on Thursday, the quarter revision, which affects 2 of our council members. The detachment commander has reached out to myself and Deputy Reeve Sipe and basically informed us that they will not be having officers at board meetings. So knowing this from our perspective anyways, it wouldn't make sense to go ahead with that meeting. The quarter revision is a little tricky. Under the Drainage Act, there's time frames that have to be met. So for example, you have to hold the quarter revision between 20 to 30 days between that notice going out, which puts us in the 10-day time frame of when we scheduled that meeting. I was on the phone with OMAFRA to try and get an answer of where we would stand if we didn't go ahead with that, and basically on that call, the drainage coordinator for OMAFRA kind of walked us through our options. The one thing he noted, well, his first question was, did we receive any written appeals for this drain? So under the Drainage Act, we're required to receive any written appeals by 10 days before the quarter revision. That date was March 9th. We did not receive any appeals. That is our only real obligation under the Drainage Act. So then your quarter revision is held. At that time, the quarter revision can make a decision of whether they want to hear verbal or late appeals. In the past, for different quarter revisions we have, in other ones we haven't. But the fact that no one submitted a written appeal is basically all we are obligated to do under the Drainage Act. So AMAFRA's recommendation was basically that we could go ahead with the meeting with just the quarter revision members, and because of the fact there's no written appeals, a motion could be passed to not allow verbal or late appeals, and then basically the assessments would stand as is, and then that would initiate the next time frame under the Drainage Act, which is 28 days for that appeal period before the bylaw can come back for final adoption. So we are the initiating municipality for that drain, so it's up to us whether we go forward with it and how we go forward with it. But that is the conversation I had with OMAFRA today.
So I think I should hand that over to our two members that sit on that board and see how they feel. Did you want to go ahead with the meeting? And
I'm okay with it, that'd be just the three of us. Okay, three of us?
There would be yourself, Councillor Van Hittersum,
Wayne.
and Councillor Forster from Asheville Courtwash.
That's it?
There, and then there would be the staff as well.
Yeah, and Dietrich would be here?
Dietrich could be here, or we could have them call in.
He doesn't have to be here in this case,
Exactly.
essentially.
Right. So because of the fact, if no appeals are received, if the Court of Revision made the decision to not hear any verbal or late appeals, there would be no engineer evidence to present. So whether he has to be there or not,
Okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm okay
to proceed as.
to proceed, please.
so just out of curiosity, if the councillor from the other municipality does not want to.
It's what does not want to
Show up.
Sure.
So I've been in communication with him today, and he didn't give any indication that he wouldn't be.
Okay. Okay, so that one's,
Yeah, I
Good.
think as long as everybody respect the rules for entering the office, then we should be fine.
okay, great. That takes care of that one. Trevor?
You know, it's not, the discussion about committee meetings needs to be really addressed in the discussion. Is anything going to move the municipality forward between now and April 6th? And in my mind, it's not. We know when we come into this room where we've been 5 minutes before we got here. But after we leave here into the next meeting, I have no idea where half the people have been or where they haven't been. Like, we all have to protect ourselves and understand where we are. But at the end of the day, is the municipality really going to move forward after tonight's meeting if our next council meeting is not till April 6th? The answer is no, because every committee meeting, if they make a recommendation, has to come to council for ratification. So in my mind, you know, it's ultimately the discussion of whether it's even necessary to have those committee meetings unless we're even talking about, the only discussion would be if we're not going to have a council meeting at April 6th, then the discussion needs to be how long we're gonna go without committee meetings. But at this point, I don't even think we've had this discussion, but in my personal opinion, I would, based on what other municipalities are doing, listen, I'm not here to look at other municipalities and just follow suit. I'm looking at this as sheerly a business perspective. Is the municipality going to be moving forward on any committee meeting between March the 17th and April the 6th? Absolutely not. So what's the purpose? So in my recommendation we just would not, they would all be canceled effectively midnight tonight, and they would not come back until the next council meeting is discussed and decided upon when that next council meeting is.
Okay.
Whether it be April 6th or April 16th or whatever the case may be, that's a discussion that council can have next.
But let's throw that idea out to the rest of council. Considering what we're going through, how do you guys feel about that? We have two that have,
Yeah, as far as the dam committee, the resolution has been passed. It's just working on the work plan. And most of that is just being electronically forwarded to the appropriate offices. I see no reason why they would have to meet, would not push anything forward other than a recommendation. So yeah, nothing's gonna move forward as far as the dam committee, that would be pertinent to being together.
Paul, about the other one?
Music, no problem.
You're
No
okay with
problem.
that one? Oh, what about BIA meetings? We've canceled them? Have we, or do they have to cancel their own?
That's their call.
That's, okay, that's BIA's call. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I know, I just got a thing from, for the Alice Monroe there, they've canceled it, what can be done over communications here, so.
So before we go any further, what am I missing, guys? What other meetings, what other things that could happen in the next 2 weeks or month? Because we're gonna then talk about our council meeting after that. And to the staff, did we cover everything off?
Dev was the only one that wasn't mentioned, and I'm not sure when that's scheduled. For some reason, I wanna say it's not until after April 6th anyways.
Which one was that, Carson, sorry?
Economic development.
Yeah, it was just had, so.
So I think you've covered your bases.
Okay.
And again, if sorry, Reed?
Yeah, no,
If the
go ahead.
motion is that committee meetings are ceased, the members that are us, we're advising that they're not going. So if they wanna go, like if the BIA is gonna say they're gonna have a meeting, which I don't foresee them having, then the representatives will not be in attendance. That's the direction that council is giving. So, you know, in essence, I think ultimately it'll be a very easy discussion for the other committees members when they find out the council's not going to be there. It doesn't make any sense.
Anyone else? My friend Carson here has a motion he's drafted. Let's hear what it says.
So here's what I have developed based on the discussion I've heard here. So that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby agrees that no further board or committee meetings be held until after the regular council meeting on April 6th, 2020, and further that the quarter revision proceed as scheduled with the precautions taken as discussed.
I thought Trevor said that he said until the next council meeting, because now we're gonna talk about council meeting instead of the 6th.
Yeah, I think we just take I think you just take the April 6th out and you just say the next effective council meeting.
Until
Because
after the next.
council's going to talk about the next council meeting, whether that's gonna be April 6th or April 13th, based on the calamity of what we are in that year.
Okay, so now the motion reads that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby agrees that no further board or committee meetings be held until after the next council meeting, and further that the quarter revision proceed as scheduled with the precautions taken as discussed.
Do I have a mover?
I'll move it.
Trevor, Paul seconds. Any other questions or concerns? Can I have a show, do we pass it? Thank you, passes.
Carson, do you want to talk about tenders and contracts?
Oh, before
We can, yeah. Depends whether we're going ahead with the April 6th meeting, I guess. Right.
So just for council's information, in terms of, in speaking with one of our other municipalities, as council's aware, in terms of our budget is nearing completion, but we haven't got it finalized at this point. And in consultation, and not knowing with this uncertainty, one of the other member municipalities consulted with their legal counsel and subsequently has drafted a motion, basically that proposes to authorize the Reeve, Deputy Reeve, and the CAO to basically proceed with releasing and receiving tenders within the approved budgeted amounts. And subject to as well that those are reviewed, in particular any sort of construction ones would be recommendations from the BM Ross or the engineering firm and or I believe the Director of Public Works. So just in terms of to continue the business of the municipality, essentially if council was agreeable, and we put together a list of the tenders that we would be looking to release as part of the 2020 budget. And essentially what you'd be doing is the Reeve and Deputy Reeve, you would be giving your authority as council to the Reeve and Deputy Reeve, again, to release the tenders and if necessary, depending on timing, to award the tenders. through our process. And the other motion that we have for council's consideration is to for expenditure reasons in terms of authorizing, I believe we have it set up for the CAO to authorize up to $100,000 expenditures, unexpected expenditures related to the COVID-19 situation, and then it would be funded from reserves. So that's two motions that one of our other municipalities has put forward, and their council has passed it to continue to advance the business of the municipality during this time period. And the other in terms of not knowing in terms of what expenditures may come up during this time period. I think Carson has the wording if you want to review it.
But so I clearly understand this. This is just things we've already passed, we've already agreed upon, they're already through, you guys have done it. We're just our staff's just suggesting that if we can't meet for something goes wrong, or we decide we're not gonna have another council meeting until we're gonna miss one or two, you guys will decide shortly. It's just simply just making sure the business goes through, nothing new. We're not doing anything. Trevor and I aren't gonna come in and say this and this and this took place. No, you guys already know you've passed it, we're just moving on. I'm clear on that?
Through your
Yes.
worship, so these are tenders that would basically go out, given the fact that council has adopted the draft budget in principle, right? We can't technically go ahead with those tenders until the budget is passed in final. So what this does is allow us to issue those tenders knowing that we might not have the April 6th meeting when the final budget's to be passed. But every tender project in there is something that council has adopted in principle in the budget.
Go ahead, Trevor.
But based on that discussion, the tender, so all we're doing is issuing the tender comes back, there's still the protocols in order to receive the tender and make sure there's no irregularities and all that stuff, that's all gonna come through staff. And then if the tender documentation is over and above the budgetary limit, it stops. It stops till council, because we will not be doing anything as it relates to, so we have the limit. CAO and the Reeve and the deputy have the limit of budget, but in all honesty, unless this thing drags on, I don't think me and the Reeve are gonna be one to wanna sit here and sign those documents without consulting you guys. I know I sure as heck don't.
No.
So I think ultimately this is just if this goes on for months at a time, which we have no idea what it's gonna do, this is really a precaution to make sure we can, if construction needs to start on these jobs, we could potentially start them if they're under budget for a tender. That's my envision on how this works.
That's what I understand too. Comments?
I'll put that motion forward.
So I can read what we have.
Okay.
So the first one regarding the tenders reads that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby delegates the CAO, Reeve, and Deputy Reeve the authority to release and award future tenders for the following projects: the Recreation Master Plan, the boiler replacement, condenser at the North Huron Westcast Community Complex, the Rintoul Municipal Drainage Work, a 1-ton truck, 2 half-ton trucks, the Building Condition Assessment RFP, the Westcast Community Push Repair RFP, and the Wingham Water Supply System SCADA, and further that the tender recommendations be pre-approved by BM Ross, Dietrich Engineering, or the Director of Public Works.
So that's the motion.
I will make that motion.
Okay, Kevin's first, the seconder is Rick. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries. Now, I believe the final one will be council meetings.
So it depends
Oh,
on whether you So
Sorry.
the other motion here that Diane spoke to reads that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approve the authorization of up to $100,000 as approved by the CAO for unexpected expenditures related to COVID-19 funded through working reserves.
Do I have a mover? Anita, seconder's Rick. Questions or comments? Go ahead.
Is 100 enough?
so.
Like the White House.
Dawn is
I'm
hoping
not,
so.
I'm hoping zero.
I know, but it's always better to be safer than sorry, so should it be even more? Because it doesn't mean you're gonna spend it, so it's just available.
It's council.
Go ahead, Donna.
I would say at this point, if we get anywhere near close to spending $100,000 in unexpected expenditures relating to this, that we'd wanna talk to you folks about it. So one way or another, whether we, through email, telecall, something like that. I wouldn't be comfortable going myself. I'm not comfortable going up that high. I'm hoping that we don't have to, but I still wouldn't feel comfortable unless we had further discussions with you on dollars like that.
Any other questions or comments, concerns? Seeing none, I call a motion. All in favor? Carries. What are we doing next?
Closed session.
Okay.
Sorry, I just have a question. So has, and this didn't come up as it relates to, council meetings and COVID-19. Has there any been discussion with lower tiers or even here in county as it relates, like I know we have council meetings like this. Has there been discussion about council meetings not being held like this? Via teleconference, via that type of stuff. Again, I know in the ways of the Municipal Act, this is the way it's meant to be transparent and open, but we are as effectively 48 hours ago in a different world. So, has there any been discussion about how that works in a world of a pandemic?
Through your worship, so at these teleconference meetings that we've had with the other lower tier municipalities, we've become aware that many of our member municipalities have reached out to Ministry of Municipal Affairs to see if this is something that's possible. At this point, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs has gone silent. So we have had multiple people reaching out, and we are still waiting on an answer.
So, okay.
So there was a bit of a conversation about it, and it's actually to do with the learning and at the school level and everybody being on their computer, and we have the luxury of having a former former principal at the county level, and he said that won't fly. He said because you're doing it over here, but there's 40 other things going on. No different than a county council. If we were all in our own homes and not really interacting with each other, on emergencies one thing, but on a regular basis, I just don't think it would fly. And I think a lot of them, well, I know a lot of them agree that it wouldn't fly, it wouldn't work, because we're having this interaction. You could do this where if you're just on that little screen, I might not catch everything, and you'll not see what I didn't catch, or I might not hear what you're saying. So that's a bigger conversation, Trevor, another day. For emergency, I think it'd be a great thing because we all want to be safe depending on what happens. But that was a conversation, but not really with county council. It was about the school stuff that came forward.
But what I'm saying, Reeve, right now we are in emergency preparation. Like let's call a spade a spade. Like everybody in the world is closing down work and bread, and like people are panicking. Yep. And this is and in all honesty, municipalities and towns and businesses are not helping. Mm-hmm. But we're doing the right things based on what we've been told and help to break the curve. So I get this. What we have to understand is we can't go like if this does what it's done in Italy or done in the Europe, we have to think about long term. Like 14 days is not going to be 14 days. It's going to be 14 weeks. So the world has to understand we can't just decide this stuff tomorrow and it happens. So I know the municipal housing is going to be up to their eyeballs and other problems right now, but I think ultimately what I'm asking is, has it been considered not as a future that this room doesn't exist anymore. I'm looking at it just as a temporary. How do we move business along in the municipality, because the business still has to move. Like companies, private businesses are going to move whether COVID-19 is here or not. They're going to continue to move and try to move their business. We as a municipality have to be the same way. The province isn't going to stop, and neither is the municipality going to stop because of this pandemic. We got to figure out ways to make, because I will tell you, small businesses in the municipality of North Huron are going to be crying a lot right now. And it's not tomorrow, it's right now. So we need to figure out ways of moving the business forward. And I understand the ministry needs to be involved, but I'm not looking at long-term sustainability. I'm looking at what does the next 2 months look like if we get into a position where we are Italy or Europe. We need to look at that now and not looking at it after we've already been there. So if it's been talked about at the county level and you as a lower tiers have been talking about, great. That was my comment, is we gotta make sure. It may not fly, the ministry may not like it, but we need to understand how business is going to move forward in these municipalities, because especially when we don't have a budget passed, we might have to take some initiatives to have special meetings, whether we may or may not like it. If we can't do it remotely, we may have to take extra precautions to do it, to get in here to do it, to let the move business forward and take precautions as we see fit.
Go ahead, Chris.
How we are right now is not a whole lot different from staff interacting on their daily, on their job. And as long as staff are still here working, but I personally don't see this, as long as none of us go on a trip or something and do something silly, go to Toronto or go to a bike convention. You know, see what I mean? As long as we just do our ordinary duties and stay home, you've got to go to Listowel work. But, you know, as long as staff is still coming, I don't see, you know, we can spread our desks out a little further if you want, but we still have to run the show, I feel. If you want to take off, we haven't come to this, though. But talking about council,
Regarding whether council meetings will come?
yeah. Officially, we haven't, but anyways, like I agree too with you, Trevor. Like if we do feel that it's a bit much and we should take a break from it, like a lot of other municipalities, fine, I'm all right with that. But I'm also all right with being smart about things and still coming to do our job, because staff is here and they're closer than we are, you know, when they're interacting together. And
Anita, thank you. Chris.
Yeah, before all this COVID-19 stuff came up, Maitland Valley had already problems with remote voting, and that it's in the law some kind that you're not allowed to do that. So I think the province has to look into that and advise us for that, to see if we can do teleconferences or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Carson speak
Yeah.
right now.
Through you, your worship, so, and we've had those discussions and we know that under the legislation, we would not move towards that direction in any sense without getting it in writing that we are okay to do that, but there are ways to do that, right? So in order to not miss things, every vote would just be a recorded vote, right? Stuff like that. So it is feasible. It would definitely be a learning curve for sure, but ultimately it depends on the direction we get from the ministry.
So Mike, go ahead, Trevor.
The only thing I want to say is the staff was here today, okay? But I will tell you from my place of work and probably every place of work around here, that if anyone were to be sick, whether they're diagnosed with COVID-19 or not, there's a pretty good chance the building's closed. Like, they're gonna take the absolute precaution to make sure that nobody comes into contact with something, and that is gonna be that's gonna be our reality over the next little bit. And people say that's panic mode. Well, look at what's just happened in 48 hours. We went from the borders open to borders closed. Like, so we have to, I think our municipality has to react like every other municipality's reacted. And I'm not doing this to scare people, or it's not a matter, but we have to run the business. But we have to understand, to be clear, is that staff may be working maybe remotely. That is a fact. That's a possibility. That they could be working remotely and not here either. So you know, public access is gonna be one thing, but you're not gonna have staff access either without being remotely or by telephone. So I think we have to be realistic on those types of things.
So if I could just throw it out to staff, somebody could maybe explain to me, should for some reason one of us are sick or several of us are sick, can we cancel a council meeting on a minute's notice? Or should we right now be saying we may not or should not have the next council meeting, skip a council meeting, come back a second time, do it remotely? Can I get some information here and just where we're going with that?
Through your worship, so we'd have to look at the notice requirements of the procedural bylaw, but as of right now, we talked about council or staff will continue to go ahead as if it's going to proceed or not, and then basically we'll get to a decision-making point based on where we're at, and either we'll be publishing the agenda or we'll be putting notice out saying the meeting's canceled.
Okay,
So
it's a staff decision then.
It's actually yours.
Oh,
I believe under the procedural bylaw, it rests with the clerk or the reeve. So.
it's getting hotter this seat.
Yeah, I can see that.
So that answers that question for a lot of us then, I believe, right? And then we gotta look at, down the road, we gotta look at maybe using that.
Well, I think we're gonna have meetings, me and you are gonna be in constant conversation with
Yep.
Dwayne and Carson, and, you know, we'll keep council apprised upon what we think, and if we're gonna be on these calls, I'm guaranteeing we're gonna be on other calls in the next 4 to 5 days that are gonna have indicate whether we should or shouldn't be doing it. And I think we just do it at that. I don't think we have to make a decision at this point. It's not absolutely necessary, but I think we need to be ready. I think we need to be ready, if that is the case, how we're going to continue to move business forward in this municipality.
Well, how about if we just leave it up to you? I don't think any of us will complain, and you call it, if we have a meeting next time or not.
Yeah.
Okay, just go ahead
Can
and
I,
you do it.
can
It's
I
hot
ask-
there anyways.
can I ask you to say Trevor and I so that he'll take some of the heat for me?
I looked at him a little bit.
I would
No,
like,
no,
I
there's
would
no,
like Trevor.
there won't be
involved.
any heat, not from me anyway. It's like it makes it easier. You're getting information and you're getting the sensitivity of staff and
Yeah.
call it.
I'm getting used to doing phone conversations.
Yeah,
What do you call that?
Conference calls.
Conference calls, yeah, I got 3 of them today.
Yeah. Before we make any call like that, let's be realistic. You will be called.
Mhm.
Like, there will be a discussion, a voicemail or something left unused to advise you that we've made this call for these reasons, and if you've got concerns, you can call. It'll be split and divide is what it will be. I'll call 3 and Bernie will call 3, and we'll make sure that you're well aware and well informed before we make that call.
All right.
I just want to end this. I've got an email here from Italy. It's my daughter's sister-in-law wrote it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm not sure if I sent it to you guys, but I'm going to read the last little bit. So this is what she sent to my daughter on an email because of what's going, and they live in Italy, and her parents are there. And this is the last little bit, just to give you an idea what we might be into. It's like being trapped in a science fiction movie in a nightmare that you hope you will wake up and discover that everything was from your imagination. Italy is really suffering right now, both in terms of health and in terms of economy. You can imagine the impact for small businesses that have to close for long periods of time. So it's so sad. We see our little country like this. I pray that the rest of the countries don't live what we are living right now and will be able to stop this virus early. So that's how serious it is over there. So we're doing that.
Tourism killed them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're doing that. Okay, if there's nothing else,
I'll move to go in closed brief.
second by,
You gotta take the provisions
Yeah.
of why we're looking at this.
that the council township of North Huron hereby proceeds at 7:45 to in camera, close to the public to discuss the following: a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instructions to be applied to any negotiations carried on or on behalf of all the municipality or the local boards, cross-border service agreement. Do I have a mover? Trevor moves. Seconder is Nita. All in favor? Carries. Let's take a 5-minute break.